You know that feeling, right? Your car starts making a weird noise, or the fridge suddenly dies, and boom, you're hit with a bill you totally weren't expecting. An emergency fund isn't just a nice thing to have, it's an absolute lifeline. But we all know building one is easier said than done. So today, we're going to skip the usual advice. We are going to dig into the actual evidence and find out what really works.
So, where are we getting our info? We're diving deep into a big 2020 report from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. They really did the heavy lifting here. They sifted through dozens of serious studies. We're talking randomized trials, lab experiments, the whole 9 yards, all to figure out what actually helps people put money aside. And just to get a sense of how big this challenge is, get this. The report points out that 8.4 million households in the U.S. don't even have a basic checking or savings account. That is a huge number of people living without that fundamental financial safety net.
Which brings us to our big question for today. Let's forget what we think works. What does the hard data, the science, actually tell us about turning the good intention of saving into actual cash in the bank?
All right, first things first, let's talk about the tools. Is the problem just that people don't have the right kind of bank accounts? You know, if we just made accounts cheaper and easier to open, would the savings problem just solve itself?
Well, when you ask people who don't have bank accounts why they don't, two big reasons keep popping up. First, they feel like they just don't have enough money to meet the minimums. And second, there's a real fear of getting hit with high and unpredictable fees.
And this slide is wild because it shows just how much those fees matter. In one study, people were offered a prepaid card. If the card had a $0 monthly fee, a decent number of people signed up. But the moment they added a tiny fee, just $4.95 a month, whoa, the number of people signing up dropped by 40 to 60%. That is a massive fall off for less than $5.
Okay, so the takeaway here is clear. Accessible, low-cost accounts are absolutely the foundation. You can't even start the conversation without them. But as the research shows, even if you give someone the perfect bank account, that doesn't guarantee they'll start saving. So, what else is there?
All right, what about cold, hard cash? The classic incentive. If you want people to do something, you pay them to do it. So does dangling a financial reward actually get people to sock away more money for a rainy day? The research has basically looked at 4 main types of rewards. You've got your standard interest rates, you've got matched savings programs, things like prize-linked or lottery-style savings, and of course just simple one-time payments to get you to sign up.
Let's zoom in on a really popular one, matched savings. The idea here is pretty simple. For every single dollar you manage to save, some program, maybe it's your employer, maybe a nonprofit, will kick in extra money, like 50 cents or even another dollar. It's kind of like getting an instant bonus just for saving.
And this chart shows you exactly how that plays out. So in one famous experiment during tax season, people were offered a chance to open a retirement account. With no match, only about 3% did it. Okay? Offer a 20% match, and that number jumps to 8%. A generous 50% match gets it all the way up to 14%. So yeah, it works. But look closely at those numbers. Even with a 50% match, that's free money. 86% of people still said no thanks.
So the verdict on financial incentives is they help. They definitely have a modest positive effect, especially for getting people in the door. But they aren't a magic wand. They're not the silver bullet that solves the whole problem. Which leads us to our last category, and honestly, this is where things get really fascinating.
Okay, now we're getting into behavioral science. This is all about the little quirks in our psychology, the funny ways our brains work, and how we can use those quirks to, well, trick ourselves into saving more money. So one really powerful idea here is something called a commitment device. A hard commitment is like putting your money in a lockbox. You agree to a penalty if you withdraw it early. But a soft commitment is more of a mental trick. It's like naming a savings account Dream Vacation. You're just psychologically less likely to dip into it for a pizza on Friday night. And then there's this key concept called anchoring. It's a super simple idea. Basically, the first number you hear tends to stick in your brain and influence your decision. Think about a tip jar at a coffee shop. If there's already a $5 bill in it, you're suddenly thinking about putting in $5, not 1. That first number becomes the anchor. And look how this works in real life. In experiments with TurboTax, one group of people was just given the option to save some of their tax refund. About 7% did. But another group was given a little suggestion, an anchor, like many people saved 25% of their refund. Just seeing that number boosted the savings rate to almost 10%. That's a pretty big jump for a change that costs absolutely nothing.
That's impressive, right?
But believe it or not, the single most powerful psychological hack in the entire report is even simpler. It all comes down to how you frame the exact same amount of money.
You'd have to see this. Researchers wanted people to set up a recurring deposit for $150 a month. When they asked them to save $150 per month, only about 7% of people agreed. Okay, when they framed it as $35 per week, same amount, right? The rate went up to 10%. But when they framed it as just $5 per day, the sign-up rate exploded to nearly 30%.
I mean, let that sink in. People were over 4 times more likely to save the exact same amount of money. Why? Because $5 a day just sounds like the cost of a cup of coffee. It feels manageable. It doesn't trigger that same sense of panic that $150 a month can. That right there is the incredible power of a simple behavioral nudge.
Okay, so we've looked at the tools, the cash rewards, and these clever brain hacks. Let's bring it all together. After digging through all the evidence, what's the final verdict? What actually works?
The research points to 3 clear takeaways. 1. The products have to be good. Low-cost, easy-to-access accounts are the bare minimum. 2. Incentives like savings matches, they help for sure, but they're not game changers. And 3. These simple psychology-based nudges can have a surprisingly powerful, even outsized impact, often for very little cost.
And that really leads to the biggest conclusion from the whole report. When it comes to helping people save, there is no single magic solution. There's no one thing you can do that fixes everything.
The most promising path forward, the one that the evidence points to, is combining all 3 approaches. You start with a great, low-fee product as your foundation. Then you layer on a smart, well-designed incentive to get things going. And finally, you wrap the whole thing in thoughtful behavioral nudges that make saving feel effortless, automatic, and totally achievable.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to think about. We've just seen clear, hard evidence that how a choice is presented to us can be even more powerful than a cash reward. So if the design of our financial choices has that much of an impact on our well-being, maybe good design shouldn't be a perk for a few. Maybe it should be a basic right for everyone.